Hi everyone, I'm Amy Stevens, and I'd like to talk with you this week about joy. And I want to talk about the kind of joy that is described in scriptures that I truly have trouble with sometimes, and I've had trouble understanding exactly how to obtain this joy that is referenced. And I'll give you an example. So if you look in James 1, verse 2, it says, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. But let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing." Various translations will use words steadfastness and patience, and I understand that, and I do see how trials produce these things. But the first part of that verse, talking about joy, considering it joy, that's the part that I think is difficult sometimes, both for me and for people that I work with in counseling. And I'm not sure that I always saw this in action until I spent time with my father when he was ill. And I'd like to share with you just a perfect example of what I believe is being talked about here. My father, as many of you know, had stage 4 glioblastoma, which is a very aggressive brain cancer. And after his first surgery, his life was dramatically changed. So I was with him in the hospital from the time he woke up through several weeks of intensive care, and then moving on into a rehab hospital eventually. And I just recall one night when I was on a cot beside his bed because we were very afraid to leave him. He was scared. He had woken up from surgery without his sight. He had very limited little pieces of vision that he could see, and those pieces did not make sense in his brain. And he just couldn't do anything that he had done before. Things didn't make sense. And so there was a lot of fear. And one night I was laying there on that cot beside him, and we were watching or listening to some old basketball games on Hardwood Classics. And just that's kind of what we did all night long, because sleep was very difficult for him at this time. And he just kind of leaned over toward me and said some things that were very honest and raw about how he felt. And then he said, "But this is the day that the Lord hath made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." So that is from Psalm 118:24. And that moment I thought, oh, how can he say that in this place where he is? And I was devastated. I was not in that place at all. I was thankful he was alive, but I'll be honest, there was no joy happening at all for me. And when he said that, that stuck with me. And for many of you who came to his funeral know he lived for 2 years after that and led the joyful life despite those tribulations that he was going through. And I wanted to research that further and say, well, is that scripture really just about what's happening to us right now? And it certainly is applicable. But when you read commentaries, one of the things that this segment of scripture is really doing, as I learned, was pointing you to the day of the Lord. So the day of Jesus's return. And so that became even more profound to me when I started thinking about it in those terms of how we have joy when things are difficult. So yes, today is the day the Lord has made, and we should rejoice and be glad in it. But it's because of the day that's coming and the certainty that we have in our future, the certainty that my dad had in his future. And so he ceased being afraid, and he, in the midst of it, was able to grab joy. And that's what I want to do. And that's what I want to help any of you do. And so I just thought by sharing this today, it might help you if you're struggling with that verse, or if you haven't really understood it as maybe I had not. And you know, so many scriptures relate to joy and to peace in the Lord. And so I will just leave you with another favorite of mine that I feel is related here to these concepts. It's John chapter 16, verse 33. Which says, "These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." Highpoint, I love you. If you're struggling and need support or help or prayer, please reach out. It's amy@hpf.org. Love you. Bye-bye.